Welcome to the HRchat podcast, bringing the best of the HR, talent, and leadership communities to you. For more episodes and the latest articles covering what's new in the world of work, visit hrgazette.com, subscribe and follow us on social media.
Welcome to another episode of the HR Chat Show. I'm your host today, Bill Bannum, and in this episode we're going to consider culture, innovation, insight and business transformation in the context of event production and inspiring leaders. My guest today is Janet Dell, President and COO over at Freeman, a global and award-winning leader in executive events production. Janet is no stranger to unifying teams while bringing together some of the most creative live events across the US for clients that include Dell, MTV and Forbes. Her company has produced some of the biggest events around to elevate brand presence and inspire consumers to act. When the pandemic hit, Freeman took its company down to the studs and on a dime, transitioned completely to digital and implemented a 5-year plan in just 5 months. Freeman rounded out last year, producing over 800 events and activating 116,000 exhibits. Under its leadership team, Freeman ranked number 4 in the Forbes Best Employers for Women in the US. Janet, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the HR Chat Show today.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for having me.
So, Janet, your company has produced some of the best known events around to lift brand presence and to inspire attendees to act. Tell me about some of the work done at Freeman pre-pandemic.
Great. Well, Freeman is a global leader in events, and we've put on huge city infrastructure events like the Consumer Electronics Show. We work with HIMSS, we work with Dreamforce. We've even created a cornfield in the middle of our baseball field in the middle of a cornfield to create the Field of Dreams in last year. But basically, we will create any type of event that helps bring together people and connect them. And all our great events, we know, depend on a solid foundation of logistics, the right people, the right operations, and the infrastructure so that you can bring all of this together to create something that's really incredible to connect people.
Tell me now, what did the pandemic do to in-person events? And what was your experience back in early 2020? And before you start, I'll just share with you that in addition to doing this, one of the other things that one of my other hats is I produce events for HR people and recruiters and so on. And you know, in early March 2020, Janet,
yes,
we had a whole bunch of contracts out with sponsors. They were all good to go. And we had a whole bunch of events lined up all around the US and Canada and elsewhere. And then within a space of a few days, that stopped.
Really?
And people were like, there's a pandemic here now. What are we going to do? I'd love to get your take on what your experiences were.
Well, it was almost surreal. It absolutely fell off in what felt like a matter of days. And we have operations over in APAC, and we started to see some early signs. But because of our experience with SARS several years before that, no one could have predicted it would be on this level. And then when it really did start to hit in about early March, late Feb, early March, we started to see a number of events start to cancel, and quickly had clients calling to say, our other events canceling, everyone trying to get information because there was a lot of confusion. So we really saw it fall off a cliff pretty rapidly, and a lot of revenue going out the door, and then trying to keep things calm and refund exhibitors and work with event organizers and such to plan and try to peg when events would come back. But of course, there was not a lot of information at the time, and that was a global situation. We had to really pivot when we looked at it. First, we had to look at, well, how do we make sure we preserve the financial structure of the company and make sure that we're there when events do return? And we also had to look hard at our business to say, well, how are we going to be able to help people connect when in-person live events aren't an option? Because that was something that people were quickly scrambling to try to figure out. And so we sat down as a team, and our clients always are coming to us for solutions on events. And what we see, since we're doing thousands and thousands of events and serving millions of exhibitors every year. We had to look at, well, what does the virtual event look like? And not only train ourselves, but teach our customers and learn together, frankly, how that was going to work going forward and bring events online. So that was kind of job one when the pandemic hit.
And what was that experience like then? You know, what were what were the steep learning curves associated with that? You know, what kind of skill sets did you need to make that happen, moving from in person to online?
It was traumatizing in a lot of ways. We've always had an organization with very low attrition, and because it's so important for teams to work closely together. So because we had to shutter the company basically down to, we had to remove at least 87% of our workforce. We had to first kind of deal with that trauma within the workplace. And then really Freeman did what Freeman does best, which is they switch gears and they're always in a learner's mindset, but they had to say, okay, we're going to try some things. I'm sure we're going to make mistakes, but we've got to give this our best shot because we know our customers are depending on us, and Freeman as a company is depending on us. So we started to shift to digital. We had to streamline all of our operations, and we had to look at what are the right operating models to ensure success both within the pandemic and then what we always felt and believed that live would be back. How do you prepare for that? And it's pretty significant. Like, I wouldn't say we were a digital first company, but I do think now, today, and throughout the pandemic, a lot of people learn things and skill sets that maybe they hadn't anticipated they would need to learn to this extent, while also preserving what makes a great events and strong event planning work well.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to switch focus a little bit now and ask you, why is data key to transformational leadership?
Oh, I'm a huge fan of data, and anyone will tell you that at Freeman. When you're managing lots of people in a distributed workforce, data can give you insights early on what is working well and what isn't working well, so that you can make a good judgment call or a less risky decision, mitigate the risk of a decision based off of what the information is telling you. So whether that's like an internal process where you're looking at, well, where are we having success hiring, or where are we having greater attrition and why, you can cut through a lot of the noise and start to find out, what are the right questions to ask versus every manager's frustration with the one-off anecdote or the squeaky wheel who will yell. But I tend to look at, well, is this truly a pattern or a trend, and where are we having the most struggles, so we can zero in on those things first and hopefully eliminate pain from our own internal processes, but also make it easier on our clients. I'll tell you, in the beginning of the pandemic, data really helped guide us on where were events canceling, in which counties, in which states and countries, et cetera. We tracked what the rules were in each of them so that we could advise clients on what was possible. Could they do a live? Could they do a small gathering with an online portion, et cetera? And internally, it helped us, when you had a distributed remote workforce, figure out how to connect the teams better, how to make the processes more streamlined, taking out some of the noise and the pain. And so we really used it and learned at Freeman why it's so important for us to see it. And then obviously, I think information is key to unlocking the potential of any organization, so they can make, every individual all the way down to the front line can make the best decision if they're given the right context. And I think data is key to that.
Okay, I bet you were seeing some pretty strong trends there in March, as do the number of events that were being cancelled.
Yes.
I'd guess that you were fairly clear with the data that you were looking at back then in the early days.
Yes. Yeah. But then when we had to recover, we also could see heading into the summer last year, ahead of Delta variant, you could see what Delta variant's impact was going to be. And instead of the extreme pullback of March of 2020, it was more of a hybrid approach. And we were noticing that certain verticals were willing to meet in person under safe conditions, and what those conditions were that made people want to attend an event. So whether it was your audience was one that felt strongly about vaccination plus mask plus testing on site, or you still had good attendance numbers with vaccination plus masking or testing plus mask, et cetera, those types of insights. And that helped us to plan our workforce because, of course, bringing headcount on can cost a lot of money. But in our business, we have to bring those people on well in advance of the event to do the planning to pull it off. And it helped us manage our cash burn throughout the pandemic and then understand which roles we needed to bring in sooner versus later to pull off successful events.
Okay, thank you. Maybe you can now talk to me a bit about internal employee engagement scores and why you believe that they matter.
Well, obviously, you're in our business. If you don't have a team that can work together and is engaged, you can blow an event. It really just takes one person not pulling. They're part of the event planning process to kind of take something from mediocre to great if they do pull that off. So for me, we have to retain talent in our organization, and we understood, especially going through the pandemic, what no matter where you worked, what industry you were in, a lot of people are going through a lot, having to adjust to major shifts in the world and in marketplaces and certainly within our industry. So looking at engagement scores, watching attrition numbers, seeing where things are working well and where you've got high engagement versus low engagement and then the impact on the work, it's all critical. And it's been a game changer for our company to look at that. It's also key to improving the quality of work and the happiness of the employee. If you can find out what is working well and then make sure that that's being applied in different parts of the business and really listen to your employee base, you're on a much better track, especially when there is, a war on talent going on and a great resignation. We've really tried to work hard to meet the needs of our employees so that we can continue to deliver strong business results.
Let's talk a little bit about changing the way that business is done then. Why do you suggest that a new operating model can help many organizations in a post-pandemic world?
The big shift that was happening during the pandemic, or at least what we were experiencing firsthand and most organizations, is that we have a multi-generational workforce coming up. So we saw a lot of our baby boomer population deciding this was the time to retire and to move on. And then we were seeing our millennial population grow very rapidly and Gen Z coming in pretty quickly. And so we have to eat the needs of each of these generations, their wants and desires and what motivates them can be different. I know these are generalizations, but we do have to look at the younger generations who have grown up in a digital first versus older generations that are digital hybrid and have different expectations on what is good customer service and how should you interact. We want to make sure we meet the needs of a multi-generational workforce, both so we can attract talent, retain talent, and then serve our customers who are also multi-generational, obviously. So we've looked at the operating model, and I'll give you an example where we need to make a change. There are some people that want to stand in a exhibitor services line and work with a human being to resolve an issue. And then there's others that want to self-serve and do it all from their phone in moments. And they want information pushed to them. And so we had to make sure we looked at, are we meeting the needs of our different customers and our employees, frankly, so that we can deliver according to what they need and drive engagement, drive better results, et cetera. I don't think it's anything new to be looking at your operating models. I mean, all businesses must continue to evolve to meet the needs of the market and adapt. And so everyone should always be looking at it. The beauty, or what was really painful about the pandemic, is it forced a rapid review of an operating model in all industries, as you saw everyone having to move into a highly digital world pretty rapidly. And then you saw massive gains, frankly, in people's adoption of digital tools and what it could mean within different industries. So I think that's been exciting, but it's also been not without its challenges as we're learning to continue to adapt.
Oh, it's been a roller coaster for sure.
Yes,
But,
definitely.
but we've accelerated our learning, over what should have been a 5 or 6 year period, because what's happened was inevitable, I think, in terms of
Yeah, and I
moving
think
towards
for
the
me, what
hybrid
was
environment.
exciting at Freeman, Bill, was that a lot of people thought that could never be done, and we've tried that. If I had $1 for every time we said that, we wouldn't have the same issues that we had during the pandemic. But it actually proved to them that yes, in fact, you can learn all of these different types of technology. We can integrate them. We can use this as a way to enable and empower our workforce. It doesn't mean their job's going away. It means their job should they can focus on, I think, the more value creating areas of their work. So that was exciting to watch that pivot happen at Freeman across the broad employee base.
Now then, I'd like to take a few minutes with you and
Mhm.
explore some concepts around business transformation, which your team were pretty keen for us to discuss today. And there are four key concepts. I'm going read those out, and then I'm going to turn it over to you to go on a monologue for 2 or 3 minutes and tell us a bit about each of these and why they matter, basically. So they are as follows: the renewed purpose and power in reorganization, leveraging your female leaders and how that can transform your business, pliability as a business asset if one allows it to be so, and
Okay.
embracing the freedom to fail. Okay,
Okay.
go.
All right. Renewed purpose and power and reorganization. I think that helped open up people's mind. Like the worst thing that could have happened to this company happened, and we were still standing. So we had to look at, which gives you, it kind of took away a lot of the concerns. It kind of hits on all four of these really. But we have always been a very successful company. But once it was hard to enact a lot of change because you didn't want to disrupt what was something that was already successful, even though they knew there were some issues that needed to be addressed. So I think when you took it down to the studs and you had to rebuild basically the business from the ground up, it did remind people, and there was still such a demand for virtual events and live events. You could see that renewed purpose across our long-term veterans, and then also the people brave enough to come into the live events industry in the midst of this and say, what can it be? And how can we continue to connect people in meaningful ways? And what are some of the things we might have been afraid to try before, but we're going to try now to meet the moment? Leveraging our female leaders. Freeman has been working on building out its female leadership across the ranks for over a decade, well before I got here. Obviously, I'm getting to benefit from that. But our female leaders have always worked closely with one another, but I think we saw a lot of people rise to the occasion. And we had a lot of allies and supporters in our male leadership that were working to help people see things in a different way, deliver the business. But we watched and made sure that we continued to bring in plenty of females throughout and retain females in the organization, and then try to adjust because in many cases, I'll take one segment of our female leaders is the working mom, and we had to adjust and say, all right, how are we going to make this, if you're going to have to teach children during the day while we're also having to transform a company and bring it back up, what can we do about that? And we try to give each other a lot of grace, a lot of flexibility, so that people could work around both of these things and feel both effective at home and at work. That doesn't always work, and I can say as a working mom myself, it was very hard throughout the pandemic. But I think we really try to listen and learn, and luckily we have very vocal female leaders and male leaders, frankly, that are looking out for the entire employee base. Pliability as a business asset, you've got to be agile. Throughout these processes, we tried a lot of things that maybe theoretically made a lot of sense, but then when we saw it wasn't working, and this gets into failing fast, we would pivot. And our employees luckily would tell us. And if not, if I thought I saw a pattern in them voting with their feet, we would try to adjust. And I think we've done that throughout and made that be the guiding light. We also made sure, in terms of embracing the freedom to fail, we empowered our leaders and let them know that we knew there were going to be mistakes made, and that's okay. It's how you handle the mistake and how you pivot and move forward, so that people weren't living in any more fear than they already were with the pandemic going on, because that was a reality, especially working in live events. So I think all those things together, and then a strong culture across the Freeman family and the organization over its entire tenure, made all four of these really come alive. And that's why we've been able to successfully navigate and now come through most of the recovery, even though we still see a lot of growth in our future in the next 12 months.
Well, I'm not surprised, because you guys are pretty dynamic. You get stuff done. You don't let anything stop you. You're not even a pandemic. Look at that. Hey, Janet. Before we do wrap up for today, and I'm sad that we're about to wrap up because I've enjoyed this. But before we do, how can our listeners connect with you? So maybe that's through LinkedIn. Maybe you want to share your email address. Maybe you're all over TikTok. And how can they learn more about Freeman?
Absolutely. You can reach me on LinkedIn, and also I can be reached directly on email at janet.dell@freeman.com. You can always learn more about Freeman on our website, www.freeman.com. We always have good case studies out there and lots of good information that I think is helpful to any event professional.
Perfect. Well, that just leaves me to say for today, Janet Dell, thank you very much for being my guest on this episode of the HR Chat Show.
Thanks, Phil. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the HRchat podcast. There are hundreds of conversations with business experts available for free on the HR Gazette website, Apple, Spotify, and all the main platforms. And remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on social media.